What's up, everybody? It's Jeffrey Lyles, welcoming you to another installment of Lyles Figure Files. So I've been binging one of my all-time favorite cartoons, Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and it has inspired me to put together this episode for what I hope Hasbro is working on for the next HasLab project. I'm pretty sure they've already got the 2022 one in the works, maybe something Fantastic Four related beyond Galactus, but if they still need suggestions, I've got an option for them. And that is, of course, to do one of my favorite Avengers, Hank Pym, in all of his different incarnations of size-changing Avenger greatness. So first off, I'm going to start with the absolute iconic Toy Biz version of Giant Man. This figure required you to track down some serious figures at Walmart. This was a deal where Walmart was kind of, do we want to do an exclusive? Do we not want to do one? Do we actually want to stock these figures on our store shelves? I was able to track them down, and this was before you'd spend $20 on Marvel Legends, so I was able to buy all of them at once. It was like, this is the gold mine. And fortunately, I was able to piece together all of the parts, including the variants of Weapon X. This is back in the day where we thought we were going to get more X-Men Age of Apocalypse figures. Turns out we were only going to get that Sabretooth and Wolverine from this wave. But we also got an amazing Thor figure, which was so great, held off right up until this last version of Hasbro's Marvel Legends with the 80th anniversary kind of Alex Ross tribute versions. That was my default Thor because it was so great. And I also had an amazing Warbird, Miss Marvel, whichever way you want to call her. She was great. And so this line actually came up with some really great figures. Also, this version of Ant-Man, which is still my default one because the Hasbro one that we have is too small, too slender, doesn't look like an adult male, looks very much like the mold used for Spider-Man, which didn't work for Ant-Man. So I still have him prominently displayed on my shelf. But anyhow, this is the figure I think Hasbro needs to knock off their "we can do this better than Toy Biz" checklist. This was and still remains an amazing figure. Toy Biz just put it all together. Like, they've done the Sentinel, they've done Galactus, but this is their shining achievement to me in terms of their Build-A-Figures, because this was just so well done. It's got the double jointed elbows, articulated fingers, which is great. I could sure wouldn't do anything else with that. So piece. He can grab stuff, which is awesome because he's a giant, so he should be able to clutch some people or whatever. The head sculpt is really well done. It's got all this tremendous detail. Hopefully you can see most of that. And the wrinkles in the forehead. It's got little pockets on his mask there. The antennas are actually strong enough not to snap and break on you, which is great because this figure is way too hard to track down. I haven't looked at what he's going for on eBay now, but I'm sure it's outrageous. But he's just such a really well done figure. And he's a tall giant. He's got the ratchet joint so he can go down low and get some really fun poses. One of my favorite Marvel Legend figures from Toy Biz, and still one of my favorite figures just in general from this line, from Hasbro or Toy Biz. But I think this is one that now Hasbro can finally top. You noted all those ratchet joints as I was posing him around. I think they can do a smoother bit of articulation, make him bigger, broader. This figure is really helpful because unlike the Sentinel, unlike Galactus, Giant Man doesn't require a lot of details with this outfit, which allows them then to spend more money and resources on other factors like different tier programs. But before I even get into those tiers with this potential HasLab, I want to take a look at this outfit's potential to just be a George Perez, Kurt Busiek version of Giant Man. He wore a metallic or metal helmet, had a little bit of influence with the Ant-Man look, but I think that could also be an easy inclusion. No tiers necessary, just a swappable head with more of the metallic helmet and then the bug-eyed eyepieces. That would be a nice inclusion because, again, Giant Man doesn't require a lot of bells and whistles with the sculpting. He's just a giant, basically, and they don't need to do too much detailing. There's nothing really to make that figure more than it is. The costume is simple. It's a nice throwback. And that way you can spend more on the tiers and incentives to get you to buy more. So my first one, just because I've been pulling them out all this time, is Ant-Man. There's a version of this outfit which actually is more in line with a version of Giant Man's costume, where if you just swap the helmet, you could basically have a small 6-inch size Giant Man. And then it's something you can switch out really easily, just again with another swappable head. So you could have your Ant-Man helmet here, preferably like this, classic style with the earpieces, the antenna, and this big mouth amplifier, voice amplifier piece here. That's something that that newer one did not have. You note the size difference between these two guys? It's nice and pronounced. So I would love to have a Giant Man who can hang out with the Cap, the Thor, and the Iron Man figures, maybe even the Hulk, and then size up big to Giant Man size. That would be a great first tier inclusion for my HasLab Giant Man. And the reason I say that is because we've gotten a 6-inch version of Giant Man. This is based off more of his modern look, but it's based off the Bucky Cap mold that needs to be retired last year. We've got a new mold with the Vulcan set, and I think that would look a lot better. You see no wobbly, hopefully no wobbly torso on the Vulcan mold. And, you know, it's nice to have a small scale version of Giant Man, so then when he sizes up, you can actually appreciate the difference, and it can fit on your shelf. But I need a better version. So for my second tier in this imaginary HasLab project, I'm going to go with Goliath. Now, I'm sure you can see the difference between this amazing version of Giant Man, who stands up just fine on his own, and this version of Goliath, who has these janky leg articulation, which has always terrified me because I think I'm going to snap it, but now he's doing the splits, so he's just standing sort of like this, which is awful because then he's losing some of his height, which kind of defeats the purpose of Goliath. So my thought here is, for the second tier, release a Goliath who is not as tall as my ideal version of Giant Man. I'm thinking for a new version of Giant Man, we have him maybe this tall. We've got our Goliath figure here, and maybe that's an ideal height for Goliath, but this would allow Hasbro then to make a Build-A-Figure of Eric Jostyn's version of Goliath, the evil one, the Masters of Evil Goliath. Just a simple repaint, maybe with the sneering head sculpt. If they want to go cheap, no change in the head sculpt, but it's just a repaint of the Goliath outfit. So I think a lot of people, like myself, would be very excited to add this version of Goliath to their shelf and then double dip later on and buy a Build-A-Figure wave that allows us to get the Masters of Evil version. And while we're at it, I don't know if they include this as a part of the third tier, but I definitely want to get a better version of this take on Goliath. My figure had some really crappy paint apps. It was part of a box set exclusive, so I couldn't pick the best one. But I want a little bit bigger version of Goliath in this 6-inch scale. It's too slight. Again, the Bucky Cap mold, not my favorite. Certainly not for a guy who grows into a giant. And from there, my third tier option would be another version of the Wasp. I use this one because this is a Secret Wars outfit. This came with several versions of Giant Man, Ant-Man, etc. But this is a cool figure, cool costume choice, because this was her Secret Wars attire when she was flirting around with Magneto, deciding Cap should lead the whole fashion, even though she led the Avengers at that time. And much like Iron Man, you can never really have enough Wasp figures because she has a plethora of costumes, outfit changes, and I think just having that black and gold and the blue and white doesn't really speak to how wild and how eccentric her costumes can be or have been over the years. And I think I'd love to get some more of these 70s, 80s style Maybe to go along with Giant Man, we go with the original Wasp costume. That'd be a bit of a throwback. And I wouldn't mind getting some more of the 80s era. Maybe that black and yellow attire during the Siege storyline in the Avengers to complete that whole circle of that. That's one of the missing costumes of Wasp. And it would allow us to tie in the Masters of Evil Siege storyline. Got Baron Zemo coming. Got a Mr. Hyde. We've got the Wrecking Crew and Wrecker and so many more of those characters. Still need Moonstone. Still need Blackout and Captain Marvel too. But that's a whole other podcast. So that would be a good inclusion to get Wasp. So we can have our Ant-Man that can also helmet head swap, change into Giant Man. Our 30-inch version of Giant Man. Our 12 to 15-inch Goliath. And my final choice, this is weird because there were still so many options left for the size-changing costumes of Hank Pym. Now, for a minute, I thought, let's go with this version. Go with Yellowjacket. This figure is badly in need of a re-release. It was based off of the Bullseye mode. It is on super ratchety joints, and the elbows aren't great. The layer articulation is so not my favorite. It's got that bull joint, so you got to maneuver that just so to get him to hit the poses you want. And it's just a pain compared to the more modern versions of Marvel Legends that Hasbro has been cranking out since this one. This was back when they were kind of, do we want to do these 6-inch versions? Do we want to keep this going? And it filled in some gaps for characters that we didn't have yet, like Banshee, who also desperately needs a new figure. But Yellowjacket is one of Hank's cooler outfits, attires, and even though it has that bad knack for that awful storyline where it just changed the trajectory of Hank Pym as a character, this version still needs it. And Earth's Mightiest Heroes totally did a version of Yellowjacket that would work and shows how cool that character can be. And yeah, like the wings are okay here. They're nice, soft, and pliable, but we get a standalone version of Yellowjacket, I think. I think that one will work okay. So the version that I decided to go with here for my final tier, and I think this one works best in this kind of incentive tier program, is the West Coast Avengers red jumpsuit. And I know that's not everybody's favorite, but I actually like that attire. I like the whole motif of Hank no longer being a costume character, but somebody who can use his expertise, his skills, his ability to shrink objects to become a walking arsenal, transport carrier, whatever is needed. So the whole deal with that was he had this jumpsuit full of pouches, pockets, etc., where you just pull out something and enlarge it. And that was such a nice implementation of his abilities without causing him any physical or mental stress. And the original look for it was really bulky. Like when he joined the West Coast Avengers alongside Moon Knight, who could probably use a new version to reflect that era with the gold bands. But Hank's jumpsuit was super big and just wide, like he was MC Hammer's backup dancer or something. But John Byrne streamlined that outfit tremendously. And while he was wiping away everything that made the West Coast Avengers special, he really did a nice job with Hank and made him more the leader, despite not needing to tell everybody he was the leader. He gave him a cooler haircut and just got rid of all the bulk in that jumpsuit, just made it more functional, like a flight suit. Really cool outfit, and I think this is an option that will work really well for Hank in terms of the figure and allow us to build on the West Coast Avengers roster. Hasbro's been doing that. We've gotten Tiger, we've gotten the White Vision, we've got Scarlet Witch, and we've gotten War Machine, we've gotten Silver Centurion, Iron Man. We probably need a new Mockingbird. We need a West Coast version of Wonder Man. And this version of Hank would be cool. And I think this kind of tier program is the kind of way, the avenue to get that figure. So if we don't get it, it's like, oh man, at least they tried. But I think it would be cool and allow West Coast Avenger fans like myself an opportunity to knock out another version of Hank. Now, the weird thing with all of these different versions, I'm not counting the Wasp version of Hank, that doesn't count. There's still more size changing versions. So there's the purple and blue outfit, and maybe that's one they do as well. So they can also repaint it for the Clint Barton version, and then maybe they use some of those parts for a black Goliath. So many size changing members of the Marvel universe that we haven't gotten to. I think if they started here with the HasLab version of Ant-Man, include an incentive tiered version of Goliath, simply because there's not a lot of tooling to do that version of Ant-Man or Giant Man. Goliath is even less, well, I mean, he has a little bit more tooling requirements, but it's basically the belt and just a new head sculpt. And then you can reuse it for a Masters of Evil version of Goliath. So lots of options. And then we can get smaller versions, new version of Wasp. We can get a new version of Ant-Man that actually works with a better mold and hopefully better helmet. So I really think this would be a cool option. I know because I came up with it. That's why I think it's cool. But I think this would open up a lot of avenues, knock out some different version of Hank Pym that Hasbro hasn't attempted yet, and allow us to get another villain in there on the slide. So let me know what you think about this. And I may come up with some other HasLab or some roster holes that we need to get filled in our lineup. So let me know what you think. Would you buy this HasLab Giant Man project with all the tiers I laid out? And let me know what you think. Thank you as always for watching. This episode of Files Figure Files has been filed.